It was nearing midnight when Sarah pulled into the parking lot of Jerry's Eats, an old fast food joint on the edge of town. The glowing sign flickered like it was on its last leg, and the place looked deserted except for one car parked near the back. She hadn't planned to stop, but the long drive had her stomach growling, and this was the only place open for miles. The bell over the door jingled as she stepped inside. The restaurant looked stuck in time, with faded 80s decor and yellowed menus behind the counter. A single employee stood at the register, his uniform wrinkled and stained. His smile seemed too wide for his face, and his eyes. They didn't blink. "Welcome to Jerry's," he said in a low, gravelly voice. "What'll you have?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze drifting to the menu. It was filled with the usual: burgers, fries, shakes, but something about the food descriptions seemed off. The last meal burger, endless fry basket, and bottomless crave shake. She chuckled nervously. "I'll just take a burger and fries," she said, trying to ignore the unsettling names. The man nodded, disappearing into the kitchen without another word. The place was silent except for the hum of the flickering neon lights. Sarah found a booth near the window, but her phone had no signal, and when she tried to connect to the Wi-Fi, the only network available was called the Final Connection. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Minutes ticked by, but the man never returned with her order. Instead, she started to notice things, like how the pictures on the walls all seemed to be watching her, their eyes too focused, too alive. The clock on the wall didn't seem to be moving, stuck at 11:58, and the air smelled faintly of decay, like something had been rotting for weeks. Finally, the man emerged from the kitchen, holding a tray. The burger was massive, dripping with grease, and the fries looked overly golden, almost too perfect. The milkshake, however, was a sickly shade of red, like fresh blood swirling in the glass. "Enjoy," the man whispered, setting the food down with a slow, deliberate movement. Sarah stared at the meal, her appetite suddenly gone. Something was very wrong here. She glanced toward the kitchen, and for the first time noticed a door in the back with a rusty, old lock. Above it, in peeling letters, were the words "Employees Only." Her heart pounded. She stood, intending to leave, but the man was back at the register, blocking the exit. His grin had widened, stretching unnaturally across his face. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his voice a low rasp. "You haven't eaten yet?" Suddenly, Sarah realized that the other car in the parking lot was still there. It had been sitting, abandoned, just like it had when she arrived. She turned toward the window, and as her eyes adjusted to the darkness outside, she saw them, silhouettes of people, motionless in the shadows. They weren't customers. They were something else. Waiting, watching. In a panic, she bolted toward the back door, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The man didn't follow. He just laughed, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the diner. "Go ahead," he called after her, "they'll catch you." She fumbled with the lock on the door, her hands shaking, finally wrenching it open. Behind it was not a kitchen, but a long, dark corridor. The air was freezing, and the smell of rot was overwhelming. She hesitated, but there was no turning back now. As she stepped inside, she could hear them, the whispers, the soft padding of footsteps growing closer. The corridor stretched on endlessly, the walls closing in around her. The door behind her slammed shut, trapping her inside. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the last. And as she ran deeper into the darkness, the menu board behind the counter flickered once more, changing as if in response to her disappearance.